My goal is just to build muscle, look good. I don't really care about the weights. Um, don't I don't really need to calculate 1 RM and follow these weight progressions. I just want to build muscle. What do you say to someone who might have that sort of mindset?
You ever had someone so you be like, I don't believe in God. Think about God believes in you. That's the answer I'm going to give here. It's like you might not think or you care about load because you're focused on aesthetics, but unfortunately, load cares about you. And think about it this way:
Mm.
it it's not that you need to get stronger. It goes back to progressive overload. It's not that the person with the biggest squat has the biggest legs, not necessarily. Um, what it is that the person whose squat hasn't changed in 2 years, if they're using squat as a regular exercise to try to get bigger legs, they probably haven't grown. And the person who has progressed their squat to whatever that number is probably has, because here's some interesting research out there. We have multiple analyses where we look at strong men or women, we look at weightlifters, or we look at powerlifters, and we take measures like lean body mass from like a whole body metric, or we look at muscle thickness, or we look at cross sectional area, and has a very strong relationship with their total or their strength or certain lifts.
Mm.
And it's harder to see this on a short term scale. Those relationships get much weaker when you look at the change in strength over time, because strength is impacted by a lot of factors. But when we look at this cross-sectional relationship and we look at it even in more controlled settings, like we just grab a bunch of people, have them come into a lab, and we do like an isometric or isokinetic machine-based movement that has a very low skill component. You can discriminate between who has more experience and who's stronger based upon who has, say, more quadricep volume on like a knee extension, right? So the idea here comes back to progressive overload. So if you just kind of lift to get a pump and a burn and you train hard, but you don't really track your weights, you don't think about it, you don't think about progressing the weights, at a certain point that will catch up with you, like kind of early stage intermediate. Like you can do the weight you did last week and it'll still feel hard and it'll be a pump. Unless you have a certain aggressive, very kind of A-type personality, you might not add a rep, you might not add load, you might not push closer to failure. And most people don't. Like when you go to a gym, these people have been training for 10 years. There's a lot of people just kind of maintaining their newbie gains. And if you're happy with that, all good. But if you want to move past that, you need to be seeing performance outcomes. Like when I work with competitive bodybuilders,
Mm.
again, the same way that a 500-pound squatter might take a year to go to 515, it might take a natural competitive bodybuilder 5 years to put on 5 pounds on their stage weight, and that's if they're early in their career. And you only know until you start dieting them down and you look at certain off-season pictures. So what do I if it's 1 pound a year of gains in the 5 years I work with this person, what am I looking at? One set of pictures every year? Probably not. I might get some pictures over time, but the main metric I'm looking at is, okay, so we're trying to improve, let's say, our lats and our delts primarily. I want to see that over time, their shoulder press, their lateral raises, their weighted pull-ups, their rows, their lat pull downs, and all these other exercises, they're seeing steady progress. They're able to get a few more reps here and there. Across 4 sets, they got more total volume. And their average load is a little bit higher. They can do the same workout, but at a lower RPE, rating of perceived exertion. So even though we're not trying to increase our 1 RM strength, and we may not need to use a percentage of 1 RM, we need to have some gauge of using a sufficient level of effort. So you could use proximity to failure, repetitions in reserve, or RPE. So long as that person who said that to you, let's say they want to use the same loads, that's fine, right? Like let's say right now they're training in the 8 to 12 rep range, your traditional hypertrophy range, and they feel like they're training hard. And I just tell them that's fine. You can stick with the same loads, just you know every week or every other week, try to add a rep. And then when they've hit 12s and they're stuck across the board, then like what are you going to do? So they have to assess: am I doing enough? Am I doing too little? Do I need to change an aspect of the program? So eventually that's going to happen. But if they just stick with the same loads for the same numbers of sets for the same exercises in the 8 to 12 rep range, I would bet money that they're not going to make any progress. So ultimately, even if your 12 RM becomes your 20 RM and you don't change the load and you're just adding reps, that's still a form of progressive overload. And it doesn't look like you're focusing on strength because you're not increasing the load. You could just train, and just keep training closer and closer and closer to failure as a kind of, foolproof way of progressive overload. It might not be optimal, but it's certainly something that could be done. And then you don't have to think too much about it.